it's sad to see how the government is so corrupted that they let all of this happen and they don't do nothing about it.
Hey, what's up, world? This is my second time recording this video. I just recorded the whole video and then realized my mic settings were totally messed up, and basically I recorded zero sound. So I'm going to try to go through this video relatively quickly. I got a lot of things to do and not a lot of time to do it. So let's get right into this. I want to start this video off by bringing attention to this video that I made like a little over 3 years ago. The video is titled The Truth About the Israel-Palestine Conflict. Now in this video, I sort of lay a good amount of blame on the Palestinian leadership, specifically the PLO and a couple of other organizations that were really active in Palestine. But anyway, the reason why I want to talk about this video is because I want to begin this video by pointing out this Albert Pike letter to Mazzini, which is exactly what I start this video off with, the truth about the Israel-Palestine conflict. Now, in this, at the beginning of this video, I authenticate this letter, because a lot of people have heard about this letter. Very few people have actually looked into how authentic this letter is. Now, essentially, long story short, I went and I found a source for this letter that goes all the way back to 1895. Let's see if I can get it pulled up here. It's this thing right here, this book here, La Palladisme, Cult de Satan Lucifer. It's basically like about this, like a satanic cult, basically, right? And it's dated, if you can see this here, maybe I'll zoom in. It's dated 1895. So this book was published in 1895. The Albert Pike letter to Mazzini is supposedly from 1871. Now, some people claim that this letter was like in the British Museum for a number of years, and then it was like just disappeared, and then the British Museum, or a museum in Britain, I forget exactly what museum, they're like, oh no, that letter was never here. What are you talking about? No such letter existed, right? So anyway, when you look up this book, I wanted to get a hard copy of this book, but a hard copy of this book is like several $100s, like hundreds of dollars, right? So I got this digital copy, and when I went to the page that this letter is supposed to be on, and I found where the letter is supposed to be on by using other books that sourced this book, and basically sourced the book for that letter. They said what page the letter was mentioned on and presented. So anyway, watch this video. I explained exactly how I came to this source information and why I was looking for this information on this particular page. So when I went to the page that it was supposed to be on, I found that the page was blank. It was the only page in the entire book that was completely blanked out, totally 1984. So we got 185, this page 185, then page 186, where this letter and the information about it is supposed to be on, has been completely scrubbed from the digital version of this book. Now, I would love to get my hands on a hard copy of this book, but like I said, it's a very expensive book for whatever reason, and I don't want to go and get that book and then find that, oh, guess what, on that page in the books nowadays too, it's also blank. Like, I would have to find like an original copy of this book, which I'm sure if like a recently published copy, and I guess relatively recently published copy of it is several $100s, I can only imagine how difficult it would be to find an original copy of the book, and not just how difficult it would be, but then how expensive it would be. I suspect, like, you know, there's talk about how like there's like Vatican libraries and different like private libraries that are filled with like a bunch of books that have all kinds of like hidden knowledge in them. I suspect that this would be one of those books in one of those libraries, because it's just like, this is really crazy important information, because what this information tells us is that these powers that shouldn't be are incredibly calculated. They plan things decades in advance, and not just decades in advance, centuries in advance. And that needs to be discussed, because that's sort of something that I'm going to be touching upon in this video. So anyway, let's move right on, because I'm in a huge rush here. Let's look at this first article here. IDF knew of Hamas's plan to kidnap 250 people before October 7th attack report, right? So the IDF had precise information about Hamas's intentions, but due to prevailing conceptions in the security establishment and possible negligence by officials, the warning signs were not acted upon. So I have two questions here. One question is, do you believe that it's possible for a government to carry out an attack on itself, or to coordinate an attack on itself, either indirectly or covertly, coordinate attack on itself in order to achieve certain objectives, in order to achieve certain goals? Well, I do. Okay, call me crazy, but I believe there are sick individuals in the world and sick individuals in high levels of power that are more than willing to do this sort of thing. Just like I believe that 9/11 was a blank job. The blank, of course, you can fill in yourself. The second question that I have is, how did Hamas at all think, how are they at all convinced that kidnapping 250 or however many more they actually ended up kidnapping afterwards, how did they think that this would benefit them at all, whatsoever? What did they really think? How did they really think they would benefit from this? Because they have not benefited from this at all. It's been a huge negative, and only one group has benefited from this, and it's their supposed enemy. Okay, so now let's move on. Let's go over to ChatGPT, right? So I asked ChatGPT this question. I'm looking for articles or information about Israel having spies in top Hamas positions. This is what ChatGPT responded, and I was actually pretty surprised with some of this information. But at the same time, I wasn't, because I see the angle that they're trying to work with here. So it says, Israel has historically employed various intelligence strategies to infiltrate organizations like Hamas, aiming to gather critical information and counteract militant activities. So right away, they're going to claim that this intelligence gathering or this infiltration or these sorts of infiltrations have been to gather critical information and counteract militant activities. I believe that they actually infiltrated these organizations to manipulate them into doing things that would appear like would benefit them, and by them I mean these organizations, not Israel, but that would actually completely benefit Israel. Okay, so that's what I believe a major purpose of these infiltrations are, or not the only, but a major one, right? So let's look at some notable instances, right? Some notable instances include Mossad Hassan Youssef, right? The Green Prince. So the son of Hamas co-founder Sheikh Hassan Youssef, Mossab, collaborated with Israel's internal security services, Shin Bet, from 1997 to 2007. His intelligence contributions were pivotal in thwarting numerous suicide bombings and assassination attempts, leading to the arrest of key Palestinian figures. So another one is this douchebag here, a senior Hamas member. He reportedly provided Israel with information that facilitated the targeting of several Hamas leaders between 1987 and 1995. After being convicted of collaboration, he was assassinated by Hamas operatives in 2004. So anyway, these are just instances or notable instances where they managed to actually infiltrate both a senior Hamas member and, heck, the son of a co-founder. Okay, how were they able to get there? How were they able to infiltrate the son of the co-founder? Is it possible that they had some connection to maybe the founders and the co-founders of Hamas, right? So that's what I asked next. I said, okay, now I'm looking for information about how Israel helped establish Hamas in Gaza. So Israel's involvement in the early development of Hamas is a subject of historical analysis and debate. In the 1970s and 80s, Israel adopted policies that indirectly facilitated the rise of Islamist groups in the Palestinian territories, aiming to counterbalance the secular influence of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the PLO. Support for this douchebag right here. Actually, I'm sorry, this is an organization, the Majama Islamiyah, whatever, right? So Sheikh Ahmed Yassan founded Majama Islamiyah in Gaza. In 1979, Israel officially recognized the Mujama as a charitable organization, permitting it to establish mosques, schools, and other institutions in Gaza. This recognition enabled Mujama to expand its influence within Palestinian society. Okay, so basically you had this organization that Israel permitted, I wonder if they funded it too, but they permitted it to, or if not funded it, allowed it to be funded, as we're going to see in another case. They permitted it to establish mosque schools and other institutions in Gaza. This actually allowed it to gain like a lot of notoriety in I guess the Gaza Strip, and basically allowed them to eventually ascend to power as Hamas later on. So Israeli strategic considerations. So some Israeli officials viewed the rise of Islamist groups like Mujama as a counterweight to the secular PLA. This douchebag here, the Israeli governor of Gaza in 1979, acknowledged providing financial assistance to Mujama. See, they provided them financial assistance. They didn't just permit them to do this. They actually paid them to do this. They gave them a bunch of money to do this, to build up their notoriety. And I believe they knew fucking damn well what they were eventually going to become. So, and they claimed that they did this aiming to weaken secular Palestinian factions. This was their excuse. This is their cover story. Oh, we did this to create instability amongst other factions. That's like their MO. Okay, it's like, oh, let's just create instability by funding all these different groups. Oh, and who saw these groups actually all becoming terrorist organizations? Oh, we didn't see that. Okay, bullshit. So, formation of Hamas. During the first Intifada in 1987, this guy Yassan, the dude who was like the member of that organization and member of Mujama, established Hamas, transitioning from social work to active resistance against Israeli occupation. Hamas's foundation marked a significant shift in Palestinian political dynamics, challenging the PLO's dominance. Now, what's interesting is the PLO was also like against Israeli occupation. So it's like weird how like they would feud or fight over each other. It's like, I mean, to me, it's obvious controlled opposition. It's obvious they're controlling both sides, but whatever. Contemporary reflections, right? So this is reflections nowadays. In recent years, discussions have emerged regarding Israelis' policies towards Hamas. Critics argue that certain Israeli strategies, such as allowing financial aid from Qatar into Gaza, inadvertently strengthen Hamas's governance, complicating efforts towards a two-state solution. Of course, they did this on purpose. Okay? And it's funny, too, because you hear this all the time, or at least I heard this all the time, and that is that like Gaza's like the world's largest open-air prison. And it is. So it's like, okay, if it's the largest open-air prison, how are they like allowing like these finances to get in there? How are they allowing all this stuff to get in there? I know they can claim, tunnels that go from Egypt to Gaza. Those, obviously, they knew a lot about them in the recent war because they flooded them and they did a whole bunch of stuff now after they were kidnapped. But they allowed all this to happen, okay? So in summary, while Israel did not directly establish Hamas, its policies in the 1970s and 80s aimed at countering secular Palestinian factions inadvertently contributed to the rise of Islamist groups like this one, which later evolved into Hamas, okay? But it's interesting because even here, it's indirectly admitting that they didn't just like help Hamas or this one group. It was rise of Islamist groups. Okay, it's several groups. They were inside all of them. They had their Mossad intelligence agency in all of them. Okay, so anyway, so then let's look at some articles. After that, I asked ChatGPT to find this article, which like just disappeared from the internet. But fortunately, like ChatGPT was able to find it. It didn't disappear from the internet, but it disappeared from like search engines. Okay, so kidnap or rescue. Was Hezbollah operative taken by Israel a double agent? Right. So questions remain over Lebanese ship captain extracted near Beirut by special forces. So you had this like Hezbollah operative. He's a senior Hezbollah operative. Israel went into like Beirut. They did like almost like a U.S. Navy SEALs style like kidnapping of him. But it's interesting because most of the time they just kill these people. Okay, but this time they had this huge operation to go in there and pull them out, and then they're like, "Oh yeah, we pulled them out. We just did it for questioning, and yeah, he's a total bad guy." But no, he's a double agent. He was working with Israel, and it's very likely that he was involved in manipulating these very low IQ individuals, probably, into doing dumb shit that's actually not in their best interest and that actually benefits Israel more than any other group. But anyway, let's and that's exactly what's going on over here. I mean, Israel's like they have even to today, they help out terrorist groups, and then they use those terrorist groups as an excuse for their actions. So this was back in December 2024. This is when the Assad government was overthrown in Syria. And you see there were some 250 Israeli strikes hit Syrian military targets after fall of Assad. This was during Syria being overrun by terrorists from Turkey that are backed by the Turkish government and also backed by the Israeli government. Okay, so as they're invading Syria, Israel made sure that Assad's forces could not establish a counterattack on these terrorists. And they bombed all of these military positions in Syria that were not attacking Israel at all. They did it so that they could not fight back against these terrorists. And not only did they hit military targets in Syria, but they also prevented and they threatened Iran-backed groups that were going to go into Syria and help Syria out, against these terrorists, and they prevented that. And nowadays, when you fast forward to today, when you fast forward to 2025, March 2025, February 2025, Israel is now using the fact that these terrorists have taken over Syria as an excuse to occupy southern Syria. They're like, oh no, we have to occupy the southern Syrian region, and we have to move into Syria in order to keep the northern part of Israel safe from these terrorist factions that have taken over the country. Okay, so it's just repeating itself. They're using the same exact strategy. It's the same MO, and they're doing it to this very day. Okay, but this is maybe a slightly different flavor of it. Anyway, let's move on. This is just another article covering basically the same news. Israel strikes Syria 480 times and seizes territory as Netanyahu pledges to change face of the Middle East. Okay, it's all for a bigger picture stuff, changing the face of the Middle East. Way back in the day, people talked about the Greater Israel Project when it came to the United States attacking Iraq, when they made up the story with Iraq. Oh yeah, weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, which didn't exist. And it's very simple. This was all planned from back then, even before then. But this was all planned from that time. They knew, okay, if we're going to be doing these moves, if we're going to be carrying out these moves on Syria, we have to overthrow Saddam Hussein, because Iraq was actually a pretty powerful military force. Okay, Saddam Hussein actually had his shit together in Iraq, okay? So they were like, okay, we have to overthrow this guy, because if we don't, and if we try to do some shit like this, it can create a confrontation between Iraq and Israel, and then that would be a whole other thing. Like, he would have actually probably intervened in this sort of thing. I know I just said he would have actually probably, two contradictions, but I believe he would have intervened in this sort of things. I'm not saying that he was a great guy, but I definitely think that he would have stood up for what's going on right now in Palestine, in both the West Bank and Gaza. Same thing with Libya. Same exact thing with Libya. They're like, okay, we know we have to overthrow Gaddafi in Libya, because he was another one that largely had his shit together. He was trying to completely change North Africa to be like much better with the Great Man-Made River Project. So they were like, okay, we got to overthrow these people so that we maintain this instability. Just like what Israel did in Palestine and these different parts of Palestine by having these different factions fight against each other to maintain instability and to prevent them from actually mounting a move against Israel, whether it be an intellectual move or a military move. It's all coordination. It's all to prevent that way back then, planning for what's going on today. Same thing going on in Iran, even though there's a lot of people that I can say are working for the same hidden hand. This is just basically, I believe, the cover story for a lot of the stuff that's going on. So anyway, then we got this next article. Now we're just going to move, we're just going to now move on to the fact that Israel's a terrorist state. These previous articles were just to establish the fact that Israel is both a supporter, a funder, and one that actually establishes these terrorist organizations that they claim to be fighting against. Okay, that was to establish that. Now let's look at Israel's direct terrorist actions, right? So we have Israel stops the delivery of aid to Gaza until Hamas accepts U.S. ceasefire extension. So this is brilliant right here, right? So they cut off all aid into Gaza, basically starving them to death, further starving them to death. They stopped all delivery of aid into Gaza, right, until Hamas accepts U.S. ceasefire. Really, it's just like this is just a massive human sacrifice happening on, supposedly the holiest, land in the world, right? That's basically what's happening with these fucking, Satan worshippers at the top. Okay, they're just doing a massive human sacrifice. Who knows, maybe there was a spiritual component to this because of how much they put into this sort of spiritual fucking voodoo kind of nonsense stuff, right? So they stop all delivery of aid into Gaza until Hamas accepts a U.S. ceasefire extension, right? But then at the same time as doing this, what are they doing? Israel breaks ceasefire with surprise airstrike, killing more than 400 Palestinians. Number actually went up to I think 700. Let me see. It might be in the next article. Actually, no, that's coming up. Let me see if it's we'll get to the West Bank in a second. So at this time, Israel, they stopped all aid into Gaza, saying, we're not going to bring aid in until Hamas accepts the U.S. ceasefire extension, right? But at the same time, Israel is violating the ceasefire dozens of times, right? How Israel repeatedly violated the Gaza ceasefire before breaking it completely. At least 155 Palestinians were killed during the truce before Tuesday's bombings even began. That's the bombing that killed hundreds of people, right? Almost entirely women and children. So Israel breaks ceasefire, but even before they break the ceasefire, and that's what's wrong with Associated Press, is that they already broke it dozens of times before, but they're not going to acknowledge them actually breaking the ceasefire until hundreds of people are killed in a single fucking day. Where's this article? I think it was, there's an article here where it says hundreds of them died in 72 hours. Where's it at? We'll be looking at that in a second. Is it just not here? Okay, that's lame as fuck. I guess I must have X'd it out. Anyway, so aside from, bombing the shit out of Gaza, so this one's displaced Palestinians fear Israel's West Bank raids won't stop. So at the same time as totally decimating and creating a genocide in Gaza, and it is a genocide. Let's actually take a second to look at this video from Al Jazeera. I might have played this in another video, but it's worth playing it again here.
Damning report to the UN Human Rights Council. It accuses Israel of committing genocidal acts since October of 2023. Specifically, this commission says that Israel is weaponizing sexual and gender-based violence against Palestinians with the intention of destroying that population, especially in Gaza. They point to evidence about Israel systematically targeting hospitals, maternity wards, fertility clinics across Gaza, like Al-Basma clinic, where 4,000 embryos were destroyed by Israeli forces.
Yeah, it's just sick, man. They are systematically targeting hospitals. And it's hilarious, too, because early on in this genocide, they hit a hospital and bunch of people died at that hospital. And Israel was like, oh no, that wasn't us. Hamas did that, and they actually tried blaming it on Hamas. And it's well known, no, Israel, that was you that bombed that hospital that was filled with fucking victims, filled with innocent people.
Talk about the living conditions imposed by Israel on the population in Gaza, affecting women and girls disproportionately. The starvation, the denial of entry of food and medicine, the lack of drinking water, and many other factors that will have long-term effects. The report, which also relies on the testimony of survivors, of witnesses, but also uses videos shared by Israeli soldiers while they were committing those crimes they're accused of.
And this is hilarious too. Well, it's not hilarious. It's actually pathetic and sad on many different levels. But in my previous video on Syria, on the terrorists in Syria, I said, hey, a lot of these murderers, Syria is doing this ethnic cleansing of the Alawites, committing their own little genocide over there. And these terrorists over there in Syria, we know that they're doing this stuff because a lot of them are actually recording their crimes and then uploading it to the internet. They're so proud of them. And Israel forces are doing the same exact thing in Gaza. They're recording themselves, doing this shit, uploading it, and where's the mainstream media? Crickets. Okay? It's not like there isn't evidence for this. There's a boatload of evidence for this. It's not up to debate as to what's actually going on. They know exactly what's going on. This is a report from the UN. They know exactly what's going on. This is not a biased report. There's plenty of evidence out there, and crickets in the mainstream media. And all the alternative media, too. All the alternative media, silent. Oh, no, we can't lose our funding. I'm going to be talking about that in my next video.
report also talks about sexual violence committed against Palestinian detainees in the occupied West Bank and Gaza committed by Israeli soldiers. But it also points to incidents where Israeli settlers commit violence against Palestinians that they basically abduct and torture, and in some instances also rape. They say this is a pattern of weaponizing sexual violence, and they call for accountability. For its part, Israel has lashed out against the UN, accusing it of anti-Semitism, of supporting terrorism, but that is not going to cut it. At the International Court of Justice, where already a year ago the court found allegations of genocide plausible. It also wants help at the International Criminal Court, which already has arrest warrants out for Netanyahu and his former Minister of Defense.
Yeah, so they're just going around terrorizing these populations, rape, torture, murder, starvation. Okay, this is terrorism, plain and clear. Clear for the whole world to see, and silence. Everywhere I look, silence. There was an article when it came to this bombing, this bombing here. Let's see, does this have a time when it was released? Okay, 3:10 p.m. I saw another one that covered this. The article came out at I think 4 o'clock in the morning, something like that. 2 hours later, 3 hours later, it was gone. It's like, oh yeah, I'm sure a lot of people managed to see that, and it was like a tiny little article. It wasn't even like a major headline article, small little article in the corner. Okay, so just so we all clear as to exactly what's going on here, this is the Gaza Strip over here. This is where Hamas is actually at. Then this is the West Bank, where they're now invading. Settlers are raping people. They're displacing all these people. They're going in there, stealing their houses, stealing their homes, stealing everything, stealing their lives. They're going to the West Bank and doing that right now, as we speak. And of course, this has been going on even before this, just on a smaller, on a much more microscopic scale. Now it's just happening outright. So then we have these jerk-offs over here, this Hezbollah leader, which we already know has an organization that's been infiltrated, right? So here we go. A confrontation with Israel, inevitable if South Lebanon occupation continues, says Hezbollah leader. Your confrontation isn't going to do anything but provide them more fuel for their fire. Okay, you guys should have learned this years ago, as I talked about in my video, The Truth About the Israel-Palestine Conflict. They know that this actually empowers Israel. But yet these jerk-offs over here, they don't die. You know, they rest easy. There was a video. It's funny when Israel claims, I think I actually looked at it in one of my videos, where Israel was claiming that they took out this head leader. He was sitting on a chair, and his face was totally covered, and he threw a stick at a drone. And it's like, okay, yeah, please, this is really bad acting. This is really bad directing for a film. Yeah, this guy's just sitting in a rubbled home, all covered up. You can't even identify. And then Israel was like, yeah, look at that. We took out one of the leaders. And then they get away with that. And people are like, oh yeah, see, they must be against each other. Because look, Israel just took out one of their heads. And it's like, yeah, if you really believe that, then I'm sorry. I know toddlers that are smarter than you. All right. I know toddlers that are a little bit wiser than you are. So Israel keeps some troops in southern Lebanon in defiance of withdrawal deadline. And Israel just complete disregard for international law, complete disregard for these proposals, these truces, just like this ceasefire agreement. They claim, oh yeah, look, we have the ceasefire agreement. Oh yeah, look, we have this agreement. We'll withdraw if you guys do this. But then they don't actually carry out their end of the bargain. And there's a perfect example right here. 2 killed in Israel drone strikes in southern Lebanon, despite ceasefire. So there's a ceasefire, but only one side is expected to actually cease fire. The other side continues on, complete disregard for human life or for anything. So Israel is ramping up annexation of West Bank. UN rights chief says, yeah, no kidding. Okay, now, this is an article that, this shit should be getting reported on every day. I don't care if it happened way back in April of 2024, almost a year ago. I have to bring this. I think I'm going to bring this up every fucking year. Israel attack that killed aid workers consistent with multiple precision strikes, analysis shows. A deadly Israeli attack that killed 7 aid workers from the nonprofit World Central Kitchen in Gaza on Monday appears to have consisted of multiple precision strikes, a CNN analysis of aftermath videos and images found. Okay, look, these aid workers, actually, I'll just read it, right? So WCK said in a statement Tuesday, this is the World Central Kitchen, Tuesday, that its team was traveling in a deconflicted zone in 2 armored cars and 1 unarmored vehicle. After dropping off more than 100 tons of food supplies at a warehouse in this place in central Gaza when the attack occurred. The charity said it had coordinated the convoy's movement with the Israeli military. So the whole details on it. They coordinated their path with the Israeli military. Their cars had tracing beacons on them, so their movement was being traced, and Israel had access to their movement being traced. Yet their vehicles were targeted by precision strikes. These were not accidental strikes. This was not the result of collateral damage from another strike. Their vehicles were directly targeted, and they were killed. Why? Terrorism. They were trying to terrorize aid workers into not helping the people of Gaza. They did this intentionally so that if people think, oh, you know what, I'm going to go there, I'm going to help the people of Gaza, they're going to be like, oh, you know what, I'm not going to do that because I'm going to get my ass killed by the fucking greatest terrorist state in the world, and the terrorist state in the world that faces no consequences, that faces no criticism. Why? I'm sure a lot of people can figure out why. All the media silent, both the mainstream and the alternative media. This guy, Brian, and people on my last video, oh, don't be upset with Brian over at Here's the Deal and Disturbing Illusion. Oh, he'd rather talk about Twitter being taken down. I'll be talking about that in my next video. Israel sends tanks to the West Bank for the first time in 20 years. Here's why that's significant. Just more articles on that. Palestinians displaced by Israeli aggression hit new levels of uncertainty. In early February, Israeli forces stormed Nurjam's refugee camp in the occupied West Bank and began bulldozing homes, demolishing shops, and tearing up roads. Like, they're not just going in there and killing people and like ending their livelihoods. No, they're literally going in there like bulldozing homes, demolishing shops, and tearing up the roads, making it uninhabitable. Just trying to maximize the chaos, the instability, and the terror. This is straight up terrorism. See what our last article is here. Israel, yeah, this is tied right back to the World Central Kitchen aid workers. Just straight terrorism. Okay, there's a never-ending amount of articles covering this. I could go on for hours and days covering this, and I will cover this again. Just because I cover it now does not mean I'm not going to cover it again. I will continue to cover this topic. Like, everybody should be covering this topic at least once a day every week. Or at least once a day every month at minimum. Instead, all you hear is crickets all over the place. But anyway, I'm going to end the video here. My time is up. I got a bunch of other things to do, as I said at the start of this video. So as always, try to stay level-headed. I'm not even going to say stay happy, but don't allow this to depress you. Do not allow this to cause you to give up the fight. Stay level-headed and stay sharp.
What the hell is that all about?
I don't know.